So in case people are wondering, I do read the comments on my videos. I don't read all of them, but I do try to read as many as I can. Sometimes I respond. Some of them are really good comments, and some not so much. Normally I wouldn't make a video about a comment, but one caught my eye and I thought it'd be worth talking about since it's something that comes up a lot. Now, before I get into this, let me make it clear, don't contact this person or pile on this person in the comments. I'm just talking about the flaws in this person's arguments. There's no need to turn this into a mob attack. Alright, now that that's out the way, this guy left a comment on my video about Black Mask Studio submission policy. I'll link to it below, and again, leave this person alone. Just to recap, Black Mask asks for a lot of personal and political information that has nothing to do with submitting a book. I can't imagine Peter Samedi asking about people's lived experiences or whether they belong to a special identity group, but that's what we see with Black Mask. So I called it out, and this guy apparently has a problem with that. He says, quote, LOL, it really is quite impressive how you are so obnoxiously condescending with everything you say in this video, all while being clearly arrogantly ignorant of such obvious and simple reasonings. Well, I don't see the problem with asking why a comic book publisher needs to know my politics in order to accept a submission. But let's assume they did. Let's assume the publisher specifically wants to publish, say, minority-themed books. Fine. Why ask for that information like this? Quote, is there anything you consider unique about your background, experience, cultural point of view, race, gender, orientation, etc., that you'd like us to consider when assessing your creative voice? That's not saying anything about the book or the concepts or the themes or the story or the characters. It's specifically about the creator's personal history, which A, should be irrelevant, and B, possibly breaches equal protection laws since it's effectively hiring someone based on their race, sex, sexuality, and politics. Why do you need to know this information? What could you possibly glean from that info remotely related to telling the story? He goes on, quote, why are Black Mask comics so political? Asks just some guy who is apparently too neurotic to notice the obvious or too petty to even try to believe the apparent. Are you really so provoked by something you don't like that you choose to be unreasonably bothered by it and then waste effort to shout your opinions as if they are facts? So this is just an ad hominem and really doesn't add anything to the conversation. Insulting me isn't an answer to the question, and neither is creating a straw man. The issue at hand is why a publisher would politicize their submissions page to the point that they ask questions like, quote, why are you better than anyone else to tell this story? Do you have unique experiences or knowledge or skills that inform the work? The implication of both those questions is that a person must have certain knowledge or experiences to have the right to tell a fictional story. It's absurd and bigoted and undermines the creative process. I'm better than anyone to tell the story because it's my story. My individuality is the only uniqueness I need to bring. If I'm a good storyteller, I'll do my research to gain the knowledge I'll need to make the story plausible and believable. If I want to write a war story, I don't need to go to war. I need to build that story and then look at what actual war vets say about their experiences and use only what I feel I need and discard the rest. This is a storyteller's job. It's not to belong to a certain group so that you can have the so-called unique experiences and knowledge and skill to tell that story. He continues, quote, why are Black Mask comics so political? Because they choose to be. Because they want to be. You laughably work so hard to act like they are being tricky and devious with their submission form questions when not only are they being very clear about what kind of creators and stories they are looking for, but the very questions that you so pitifully try to chastise them with are a clear indication of it. If you watch the video, I actually point out how blatant this is, so I literally do the opposite of what you claim. And your answer, if you can call it that, actually begs the question, why do they choose to be political? There is a reason they do this, and that's what I want to know, especially since it doesn't seem to be working for them. Their books are consistently pulling low orders. If the books are in stores, they usually stay there. No one's buying them. So what does Black Mask Studios get out of being this political? What's in it for them, since it's clearly not the money? He goes on, quote, and despite the idea that their books may not be particularly aimed at me or specifically written to relate to me, due to the fact that I'm a straight white male, I think they have good books. Think about what you just wrote. Their books are not aimed at you because of your race, sex, and sexuality, in part and combined. Can you think of any example of this being done in the reverse that isn't criticized? For example, if someone specifically wrote a story to appeal to gay white men, do you think they wouldn't be called on the absurdity of that? Hell, creators who don't write from a biased perspective are accused of doing it just because their principal characters are straight, white, or male, or some combination of those. It doesn't matter what the story is. Say a fantasy based on medieval Poland and Polish folklore. Somebody's gonna come in and whine about the lack of representation because the witch would be too white. I mean, if you find a black person in Poland, that nigga was brought there against his consent. This is the response these people have, so why shouldn't I point out the contradiction? Why should I let it slide that the very people clamoring for diversity create some of the most undiverse stories imaginable? He continues, quote, "While I have only read a few at this point, I greatly enjoyed Four Kids Walking to a Bank and found Black to be enjoyable and uniquely interesting. How good for you. I have yet to be bothered by any of their politics or ideologies, even with ones I disagree with. I have instead enjoyed the unique perspectives and their pensive contrast to the norm." What unique perspectives? They're all writing the same characters and same story. The settings may be different, but there's no uniqueness to be found. It's all about more representation and being a victim and punching Nazis. It sounds less like you enjoyed the two stories you read and more like you're virtue signaling. See, I liked it, even though it's not for me. Here's the thing about actually liking something. If you really liked it, you'd never tell anyone it wasn't made for you. You'd never even bring it up unless someone else did. I like me some Project Runway. I don't know the first thing about fashion, but I like watching things being made. I like the different personalities. I like me some Tim Gunn, and I like watching Michael Kors say the most horrendous shit to people. I also like the silliness of the challenges and people bringing their skill and talent to make it work. Is the show made for me? No, but I don't care. I like what I like because I like it. You see the difference in that response. I'm talking about what appeals to me about the show, not some ridiculous idea of watching something for political reasons. But he goes on, quote, "You don't have to like their books. There is no need to act like they are not clear about their books being transgressive. It's pretty hard to be transgressive by doing the same thing 80% of the comic book industry does. I agree that they're specializing in it, much to their disadvantage, but they're not doing anything unique. And I don't need your permission not to like it. Their half-assed attempt at being transgressive is why I don't like the books. There is no need for you to choose to be so provoked and bothered by things you don't agree with. You mean like coming into the comments of a video and voicing your opinion about how you don't agree with said video? Oh, that's fine, but making a video doing the same thing isn't. Are you sure you're a straight white man and not a black as fuck pot? There is no need for you to spout your asinine hate and opinions like they are facts. Finally, you got to the narrative. You were taking the long way around like you're John walking up to the Red Keep. I present my opinions as opinions. If you choose to take them as fact, that's on you. You can disagree, but you're going to need to back it up with some evidence if you want me to take it seriously." Then he says, quote, "Grow some thicker skin. Dude, if my skin got any thicker, militias would use it for body armor." I love how people always say this when someone they disagree with actually explains their views. Stop projecting your perception of yourself onto others. Just because you're easily offended doesn't mean everyone else is. Maybe they just think the idea is bad and they're just voicing their opinion. Stop trying to project a motive onto people and listen to what they actually say. Then he says, quote, "Spend your effort talking about books you enjoy instead of bitching about ones you don't." Ah, yes, the tried and true "don't criticize me bro" routine. Look, I'm gonna talk about whatever I want to talk about. Neither you, the far left, the far right, or any authoritarian busybodies are going to tell me otherwise. You have the option not to watch the videos. You have the option to disagree. You don't have the option to choose what I talk about. This idea that you get to decide the nature of the conversation doesn't fly with me. You get to talk about things you don't like, I get to do the same. Just because you don't like the opinion doesn't mean I don't get to share it. Try reading stories that are not made to relate to your narrow tastes and experiences, while using a little empathy and boldness. I really do love the irony of a straight white man telling the black guy what to read. Dude, I'm the guy the black comic was supposedly written for. I live in the black community. I've seen the bigotry of police. Hell, one of my cousins was a defense attorney in a high-profile wrongful prosecution case. I got to watch him almost flip out on the police superintendent on live TV. So you want me to go outside my narrow experiences as a black man? I already do that. I read manga. I read translated novels. I deliberately seek out fantasy and science fiction not based on European folklore and history. And that makes your comment doubly ironic because Black Mask does the opposite. They see creators who are only interested in talking about their narrow tastes and experiences. Every book is built around playing to those niche perspectives, ignoring that if you get that specific, and then argue that only people who share the same experience can even begin to understand, let alone enjoy the story, you will undermine the very thing you want to do. You will never get people who don't think, act, or look like you to listen to anything you have to say or begin to understand you. The only way to bring in the masses is by telling stories we can all understand. The settings and characters can be unique, but the themes need to be universal. Otherwise, you will lose anyone who isn't exactly like you. The Black Masqueraders don't do that. They just project themselves into their characters, telling the same stories over and over again to the point that the books are virtually interchangeable. They don't step outside of themselves and try something different. If the writer is a lesbian, she's only writing about lesbians who are either like her or her idealized self. Hell, they're not even going to write about gay men. And it's always the same thing. Magdalene Visaggio pretty much only writes about transgender women, never even considers writing about trans men. It's always trans women who always think like her and are obsessed with causing head trauma. It never occurs to Max to do anything other than maybe write a lesbian, or really write a gay woman as a trans woman, because that's what she does. Imagine though if Max wrote about a trans man, or a gay man, or about a person whose partner revealed that they were trans. Where's that story? The one told from the straight woman's perspective when she finds out that her boyfriend thinks he's a woman. Imagine if she did that. Imagine if she played it straight, played it realistically, created a character, built that personality, and then placed that woman in that position and let her act as she really would, not in some storybook. She doesn't care if he's trans because love conquers all thing. Let's see the nuance. Let's see the realism. Explore that concept as a trans writer of what it would be like for someone who found out that the love of their life thought that they were the opposite sex. Mags isn't going to do that because that would be going outside of her narrow tastes and experiences. And this holds true for just about all of the Black Masqueraders. They are stuck in their own minds, fixated on it, as if there are no other stories to be told. They can't fathom the idea that somebody can like or relate to a character who doesn't look like them. That may seem fine to you, but I'm not that shallow. I'm afflicted by this thing called imagination. So I don't need characters to look like me or share my experiences to relate to them or like them. Virtually none of my favorite characters share anything in common with me. I don't need to read about Black people in order to be entertained, and as a creator myself, I don't need to only write or draw Black people in order to be creative. I mean, it's amazing what happens when you actually have an imagination. Whole worlds just open up to you. Completely new ideas just spring forth like Mexican babies just everywhere. I don't have to try to come up with ideas. I have to try to shut my brain down from doing it because I've got more ideas than I can ever hope to get done. Everything I see, every book I read, every game I play creates a new path, a new inspiration, a new thing to discover. I don't understand how any actually creative person could limit themselves to their niche experiences. Bitch, take your ass to Westeros. There's stories there. But no, these folks write the same woke stories over and over and over, alienating anyone who doesn't share their politics or isn't interested in their woe is me victimology or their blatant and ironic bigotry. All that's going to do is run away potential customers. That's something any publisher with an iota of business sense will understand, but apparently Black Mass Studio doesn't, and neither do you. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.